Hey, friends and fiends of the pod, this is your host, Nate Wyckoff, inviting you to listen to this rebroadcast of a classic episode while we work hard to get brand new episodes out your way directly into your earballs and your eyeballs. Remember, you can listen to classic episodes at cultandclassicfilms.com as well as watch us at youtube.com/@cultandclassicfilms. You can also go to cultandclassicfilms.com and our shop and buy exclusive cult movies and collector's editions directly from us on high definition Blu-ray. You can also join us on Patreon at patreon.com/cultandclassicfilms so you can get those exclusive cult movies delivered to you every month at a deep discount. Plus, you help us run and money goes directly to the filmmakers responsible. So you are supporting independent film. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to Cult and Classic.
Welcome, friends and fiends of the pod, to another episode of Cult and Classic. This week's theme is Turn Off That Idiot Box, which if you don't know, idiot box is another phrase for the television, although I think it's being replaced by the laptop. With me, as always, is myself, your host, Nate Wyckoff, and we also have Tad Mastroianni. How are you doing, Tad?
Sup, scrubs?
And Greg Johnson. How are you doing, Greg?
Good, but I took your turn off the tube thing seriously. I actually didn't watch either movie, so.
Mandy Longley. How are you doing, Mandy?
I'm good. I'm nice and cozy down here in my soundproof laundry bunker.
I was going to say.
For those of you that do the video.
Yes, if you guys, we've launched our Patreon. It's patreon.com/cultandclassicpodcast. There are 3 tiers. I promise this will be a short spiel. The first one is $1. It gives you access to videos of all of our podcasts. You can see our beautiful faces and often those of our interview guests. You can do $5 a month, which gives you access to the videos, plus any other special content, extra things that we put out, and an autographed custom Cult and Classic trading card every month to your door. The third one and the final one is the Drinkers of the Kool-Aid. That's $10 a month. And you get the card, access to the videos, and you get a zine or zine, if you prefer, every month. Those little self-made publications that we make. And they are super awesome and super different every month. So check that out. Patreon.com/cultandclassic podcast. Thank you so much for the Patreons who are already members. So the 2 movies, I'm super excited about these. The 2 movies that we have for Turn Off That Idiot Box are Videodrome by David Cronenberg with James Woods and Debbie Harry. Fantastic movie, in my opinion, but we'll see what everybody else thinks. And then TERRORVISION, which is another classic by Ted Nicolau, who is doing this for Full Moon Video. Super interesting watch. So we've got a request. Thanks, fans, for giving us requests and tips, because we love it and we listen to it and we do this for you to give more synopsis of the film. So I'm going to go into Videodrome. This is a tough film to give a thorough synopsis of because it is a little bit off the rails. So anyone who's familiar with David Cronenberg as a filmmaker knows that he is sort of the progenitor of body horror in the US. That's the stuff like weird mutations, and he really likes the crossing of technology and human personality. So he messes with that heavily in this film, Videodrome. James Woods plays the head of a small, it's sort of like it's not a pirate station. They don't have them so much anymore, but it's sort of that Z-grade television station that used to exist in the 70s and 80s where they played really off-the-wall stuff like sex, violence, weird things. So he's got this small station. He's trying to find the weirdest, edgiest stuff he can put on it to make a name for himself and the channel. And he comes across a pirate video broadcast of what looks to be a snuff film. And it's called Videodrome. And there's no plot. It's just people being whipped and abused in a strange room and then ultimately murdered. And he doesn't think it's real, but the sources that he uses to track it down tells him it is. Turns out it's this crazy signal called the Videodrome that is used to control people's minds, and a group wants to take over his station in order to essentially make the terrible people that watch his filth whack themselves or do whatever they want them to do. But there is a trick, is that he sort of learns to control this new flesh, as they call it. It's really bizarre and it's totally off the wall, and I absolutely love it. Let's go first to Greg. What did you think? First, did you have any thoughts or knowledge of this film going in?
I didn't. I'm actually trying to think of what Cronenberg movies I've seen before. So I was
His
excited
most,
to.
yeah, his most famous one would be the remake of The Fly with Jeff
Oh,
Goldblum.
yeah, yeah. I've definitely seen that one. I wasn't a big fan of this. I thought it was boring, which utterly shocked me. I came in to a Cronenberg movie with James Woods, and I'm thinking like this is going to be an absolute treat, and it felt like it just spent the whole time kind of reaching somewhere and then pulling its hand right back, and yeah, until the
Yeah.
end, I was just kind of bored.
It does. So it is interesting that you mentioned that. It has these weird scenes, not so much of extreme violence, sort of weirdly realistic violence, like in the Videodrome whippings and things. But then also this really crazy special effects body horror. Like there are scenes where James Woods, he essentially becomes controlled by the Videodrome people through a sort of vaginal looking tape deck insert that grows in his stomach, and it appears and disappears, and you're told that these are delusions, but you don't know how much is a delusion. And at one point he gets his own hand stuck in there with a handgun, and he has to pull it out. Really weird stuff. And even with that, the tone of the movie I don't think is very tense. I think that it's a very mellow tone, and it can my wife watched it with me, Corinne, and she loved the beginning because the character actors are so strong. And then as it went on and got to sort of the crescendo, it slows down. And you kind of are waiting. You're like, okay, well, now he's going to go here and shoot this person. And it takes longer. And I think that it's not a long film. I think it's somewhere in the 90-minute, 100-minute category. So let's see. Yeah, it's 97 or 6. Excuse me. It's an hour and 27 minutes. So it's actually fairly short. Although there are several versions.
If Eyes Wide Shut was a little bit too fast paced for you, maybe check out Videodrome.
That's brutal. That's brutal. Tad, what did you think going into this film?
The only Cronenberg film I'd seen, even though I was well versed in his body of work, pun intended, is The Fly. And to this day, I will not sit down and watch The Fly again. It was one of the most disgusting movies I'd ever seen in my life, considering that, again, I may have mentioned it before, but when we watched Dead Alive while I was eating a bucket of chicken, that didn't bother me the way The Fly bothered me. But this movie, I dug this movie because this movie is one of those that you watch it now and it's just as relevant. Actually, I think it's more relevant now than it was back then. Back then, people didn't really know what to expect with the internet and the depths of depravity that the internet would provide everybody. So this movie didn't even understand that it was predicting the future, except it didn't realize that TV was going to die and it was going to be replaced by something way worse. So that's...
So this is interesting to talk about because the focus of this is televisions, but there's sort of the good character who helped develop Videodrome, who is actually dead partway into the movie, and you don't know it. He goes by essentially a screen name. They don't call it a screen name, but he goes by Professor Oblivion. And essentially, he's like, my real name is irrelevant. And he runs this mission with his daughter called the Cathode Ray Mission, which I fucking love that. It is the cathode ray is, of course, the type of tube that was in our old big box televisions. And the idea he had is that by basically taking in vagrants and people off the street and homeless individuals and giving them a few hours of television a day, he would prevent their mental decline and tie them into society and keep them tied into society, which is an interesting idea. And you do, I don't know, where I am in Palm Springs, there's a lot of homeless individuals because there's no winter, even though there's a blistering summer. And it seems like the longer people go without what we would consider normal interaction, they really do have trouble reconnecting with the world. And so you kind of wonder, like that rang true to me. I don't know how anybody else feels about that. But to get to the bigger point with the internet is credited with being started on a small scale in like 1983, I think. But it didn't technically go live to like the populace until 1991. So this movie, 86, and some people say 87 when it aired, the idea that television and the screen is connecting us is really crazy because it's easy to watch this movie and think, oh, it's the beginning of the internet. We knew it. Yet people didn't know about the internet as a whole during this film. So I thought that was an interesting bit as well. Mandy, what did you think going into this film, and what was your take?
I had no expectations going into this. I had no idea, except that we were watching movies about TV and how it's bad for you. No. I get that sense from the like the images, like the poster images that you said. So watching this movie, I gotta agree with Greg. It was not for me. Did not like it. Didn't like the tone. Didn't like kind of the vilification of like BDSM interests kind of thing, because that was more talked about than like just murder like, that was happening. And yeah, I thought some of the ideas were very interesting, especially like the mind control aspect and like him overcoming that, bringing around, and then like the visualizations, like you said, like his little tape deck thing like going into his stomach, like was very like interesting. But overall, like just like the pacing and the tone of it just wasn't for me.
So it's interesting you brought up the BDSM element, because it's brought up and it almost goes away, right? And I think, I don't know that I would agree that it's a vilification, because so the main progenitor of this is one Videodrome, The Signal, where they watch people get whipped, which is very sterile, right? It's a one camera in a room. It looks sort of like what if we haven't seen one, what we imagine those awful ISIS execution videos to be, right? Like it's just one person in a room, one camera, and one victim in a room, one camera, and several people abusing them in like big hazmat suits. And but then we also have Debbie Harry's character, famous lead singer of Blondie, who, by the way, I think does a fantastic job acting in this film. It's always shocking to me when I see a performer from a different genre, a different medium, sort of transition into film pretty easily, it seems. And she seems to have this fling with James Woods' character, and she's super into sadomasochism. It's not even so much bondage, just sadomasochism. She has him pierce her ears while they're having sex, and eventually she burns herself with a cigarette on the breast. And it's sort of, I actually sort of liked I liked that James Woods' character as the male character who runs sort of a sleaze station is not the one that's comfortable with sexual violence or violence in the sexual realm. And the female character is the one that is. Now, I think there can be a problematic thing with that, which is sort of the over-sexualization of a woman, whereas if sexual depravity happens, it has to be on the woman. But I think so often we would default to thinking that he would be the one that's into this, and yet he's actually not. And she's really seems interested and turned on by Videodrome, the tapes, whereas he's got a disturbed fascination. He clearly is interested in them, and likely in a sexual way, but it upsets him that he is. And I think
I would say that, he maybe came up as upset, but also cautious and possibly knowledgeable, or like having a good street sense about it. And the whole Videodrome tie-in aspect, where I felt she came off as somewhat naive and a bit unbalanced. What you don't say. A little bit not all there.
Because at some point she wants to go audition for this show. Supposedly.
She does, and I think that that's not so bad in like some senses, but she seems like she's doing it almost to just goad him.
Well, the interesting thing too, and this is a spoiler, right, is that, and remember, we will give spoilers on the show for the purpose of critiques. I, at no point in time, give spoilers that I think make the film not worth watching if it sounds interesting. There's a lot to every movie, even the dumbest movie that I have viewed, where it would be impossible for me to explain everything about it that might be intriguing to a viewer. That said, we're told later by the daughter of Dr. Oblivion, or Professor Oblivion, that this character is actually dead. She was murdered on Videodrome before, and she was recorded and given to, or shown to James Woods' character to give him hallucinations that she's having an affair with her. So all of his interactions with her after he appears on a television show with her at the beginning are theoretically complete fabrications, which does make it then call into question the purpose for a lot of that too, because she has these, I don't exactly know what her interest, except to get him more involved in it, but he seemed pretty involved to begin with. I guess the idea is that because he doesn't want anything bad to happen to her, and he's afraid that Videodrome is more than just a fake abuse show, that he then seeks it out more fervently. But it does sort of seem like maybe he wouldn't even need that impetus. He seems quite interested in this program to begin with, right?
Yeah, he's like, I mean, he's into it. He's trying to get it on his TV station.
Right.
Yeah, like, I think what I didn't like is, like, it's totally cool that he's interested in that, and she's exploring that as well. What I really didn't like is, like, they were saying, like, oh, we're gonna go after people that are interested in this content and, like, mind control them.
Oh,
like,
sure.
This is what we're using to bring it in. And, like, that's how I meant, like, the vilification. Like, I didn't really like, it was like, oh, like, you're the target audience, so you're bad. And, like,
but
you're
that's
the people that we're
and I would
hit.
argue that they're not really the good guys that are using the station, right? Like, they're
Oh, he does not come off as a good guy at all. Like the
sort of nobody does, right?
Yeah.
Except for,
Yeah.
so let's listen to this one. So this is the character Marcia talking to James Woods, and Marcia is a fantastic actress, Lynn Gorman, who she's been in tons and tons of things. She's Canadian, and she plays the old woman who she's a finder for these videos for his channel. So she brings him, you know, these softcore porn videos of weird types. And basically early on in the film, she brings in this sort of faux Roman Greek orgy video that's very tame. And he's like, I'm looking for something else. Can you track this video for me? And she says, okay, I'll do it. And then they have lunch at a Mediterranean restaurant where there's belly dancing. There's lots of interesting sets in this film, and none of them are very high expense, but I appreciate that Corman made the effort to make these scenes and sets unique. But this is them talking about Videodrome. Here we go.
Did you get in touch with a friend in Pittsburgh?
In a way, at a distance. A subterranean grapevine.
Yeah.
Max, Videodrome is something for you to leave alone. It is definitely not for public consumption.
Channel 83 is a little small to be considered public.
It is still too public. Do you understand me?
No, what is it? What's the punchline?
I think it's dangerous, Max. Videodrome.
Why? Like it's mafia? They do business.
It's more, how can I say, more political than that.
Come on, Masha, what are we talking about?
Videodrome. What you see on that show, it's for real. It's not acting.
So this, first off, I just want to say that that's a case of a really great character actor stepping into a role and sort of owning it. Like the little touches, like when the waiter comes over, at one point she's like, you owe me for this, Max. And he's like, anytime, shower together anytime you want. And she goes, you're a little old for me. And of course she's like twice his age, or 50% more age than he is.
I absolutely love that.
It's a fantastic touch. And
I want a whole prequel movie with just her. To be honest.
her, right? She's so owned it. She so owned it. I absolutely loved it. But that was an interesting, I like this sort of reminds me, you know, we discussed in a much less realistic way. Obviously, this is a very magical realism film, but it sort of has that vibe of a weird, gritty 70s, 80s New York City in the way that Cruisin' did, where we see little bits. In this case, I think they're probably a little less realistic, but we see bits of him walking through the street and the people on the street. And it gives a very strong sense of not now. Like, I did not feel like this was a contemporary film. And I don't know if anybody else felt that way as well. And perhaps it's also because they constantly are showing television screens, and obviously the television screens are very early 80s models, right? They still have the faux wood grain front, you know, they still have knobs and scan lines and vertical hold, things like that. And so it gives it this sort of antiquated but still technological vibe that I thought was interesting, that would be harder to do now.
It's the whole movie's lo-fi without really even trying, especially because the movie's all about it feels like a hallucination because of the way it's filmed and the way the characters act and just the way the lighting and the sets are designed. This also reminds me about the fact that this is the movie. Now I know the context. There was an old You're the Man Now dog from I don't even know how long ago. It was James Woods smacking the woman to Can't Touch This by MC Hammer.
Yes.
And now I understand. And when I saw the scene, I was like, okay, this scene makes much more sense. And you find out he didn't slap her at all. And then I was like, oh, fuck, what is going on with this movie?
Right, and that's his assistant, who I think was played by Lali Cadeau, I think, and she is that correct? I'm not sure, but the names. Unfortunately, this is one of those films where people will absolutely correct me on this, and I welcome it. So please do. But she plays his assistant, and she's great, and she's got only a few bits. But they're pretty strong. She actually opens the movie on a television screen. She brings him a wake-up message about the day on VHS every night so he can watch it when he wakes up instantly in the morning. It's like his alarm clock. And it's sort of this interesting high-tech, it's this high-tech morning in a low-tech way as far as we're concerned, like he actually has to physically put in a VHS and program the time on the VCR to wake up that way. Like it's a manual process for a technological advancement. It's just very strange, but it also sort of, I feel, works to the advantage of the movie. Its movie's like central premise, right? Like my wife's complaint, I think, is that she's like, it's high on concept, high on visual visual and character quality, low on plot. And the plot is very ephemeral, very see-through, peer-through, right? Like the end of the movie is essentially James Woods, we assume hallucinating, we don't really know, becoming an assassin for this evil group using Videodrome, but then breaking the programming, we think, and becoming sort of their downfall, and then shooting himself in this scene where he's talking to Debbie Harry's character through a video screen that may or may not be there, probably isn't there, and he shoots himself in the head and then says, "Long live the new flesh," which is a famous quote in the cult field now. Long live the new flesh, meaning he's advancing to the next stage of evolution, some sort of technological being that is more effective than humans. Now, the irony is, of course, is that we don't know if he just killed himself or not, right? Like, we don't know, did he ascend, or is he just some lunatic who's been brainwashed in like an old tanker who just shoots himself in the head, and that's the end of the story? There's all sorts of, you can go online, there's all sorts of interesting plot reads. Like there's people thinking, oh, well, when he breaks the programming from the evil Videodrome guys, he's really just been reprogrammed by Professor Oblivion's daughter, who he was supposed to kill, and she's just programmed him to kill himself, thinking that he's going to the next stage. So there's all these interesting things. It's one of those movies where it's very open. There is no right or wrong answer. They could be proven one way or the other.
It's a theme I've seen a few times mentioned, that it's basically a movie about themes with no payoff. But the payoff to me was really sitting down and thinking about like what technology has done to us. I mean, the whole plot of the evil whatever organization it was that they were trying to cull the weak because they felt that this mass media we'd been force fed for already like 2-3 decades, was keeping people docile and weak. And he said in the movie, like, the rest of the world's getting harder, we're getting softer. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's still an argument that's going on today, especially on the weird fringes of the internet. And
it's so funny too. It's an interesting dynamic, and I don't think it could have been explored more, which is that's like their ultimate plan, right? Like they killed, so the characters we're talking about, the ones who we know about that use Videodrome are these two guys who run Spectacular Optics, I think it's called, which is essentially an eyeglass company that also makes things like military guidance systems. And they have this signal that can program people via TV, which is their susceptibility is heightened by being shown violence, which is why the Videodrome TV show was created, or the episodes were created. And the one that helped them create it was this Professor Oblivion, but he wanted to use it to sort of advance mankind to the next stage of their evolution. And so they killed him. But he, you know, continues to meddle by having recorded tons of videos that we don't know what's really on them or not, because half the movie is a delusion. So it's interesting that that's something that it was potentially, we're told, created to advance mankind in a progressive sense is being subverted by these essentially short-sighted, hardcore, you know, neoconservatives, right? Like they're like, oh, these people watch porn. We're gonna wipe them off the planet with this video signal, and we need you to do it. Like, it's this weird turning this progressive tool to the opposite use. And I'm sure that there's more subtext in there that I'm missing, perhaps because maybe because we're not part of the Canadian scene. We're all from the United States, and, you know, this is a Canadian production. Or it could just be that it's about the sort of hardcore, heavy law enforcement 80s. And so I think that that's an interesting thing to consider, although I don't think it's fully explained. It also, from a video game standpoint, anyone that loves Hotline Miami, they took liberally from this movie as well, because that's full of those weird signals controlling people, 80s Cold War vibe, bizarreness, and I totally love it. And anytime I can think about that game makes me happy.
Since you brought up video game comparisons, I was actually kind of thinking, as you were elaborating on the plot and kind of the themes, the game BioShock, and kind of this idea of all these people getting meddled in scientific endeavors that maybe we shouldn't have,
right, you
know, dived into, and no one's really right, no one's really wrong, but we need to get this science like the fuck out of here.
Yeah, like it's sort of, it's a weird, you could say it's a weird new take on the whole playing God thing, right? It's the Frankenstein monster. In this case, Videodrome doesn't seem to be an entity so much as it's a tool that entities are using, but it's insidious, right? There's so many things that, and it's definitely supposed to take you to the place where, we all, especially if the people that would go to see this movie are somehow interested in depictions of violence, right? For one reason or another, whether it's entertainment or excitement or horror or any of these things, we're enticed by that or excited by that, whether in good or terrible ways. And you're essentially watching it and being told that, hey, what if there was something that preyed on your desire to see this in a way and turned you into the thing that no one wants to be? And I think that that's one of those sort of mind fuck elements here. That said, I do think that this film has a distinct first half and second half, and that the pacing radically changes. And I don't know how that could have been avoided, but I feel like it could have been transitioned more, because I feel like the people who want sort of a thriller are really engaged for the first half of the movie, because he's tracking down this signal. You've got these great character actors being all these weird parts. And then the second half, when he sort of is aware of the conspiracy, he's then programmed to be an assassin. And then we have him slowly walking and going in and out of delusion and shooting people, and then slowly walking, and then you know, being shot, and then the ending. So it's like this, it's really, we know, it's sort of like we've spent the first half of the movie trying to figure out what's happening and not knowing what's going to happen next, and the second half of the movie knowing what's going to happen relatively, at least for most of it, and waiting to watch it. And I think that shift is problematic for some viewers who aren't as patient. And that's not a dig on non-patient viewers. It's more of a dig on the pacing and the fact that they were like, okay, well, this works, so we're going to do it this way. But is there a better way? Maybe if we had another 2 years of development, you know.
Jeff was here to rewrite it for us.
I know,
right?
Our longtime contributor Jeff Tucker is absent today. I think he got sick of my film choices and refused to be a part of it. But no, I think And just to round out the cast, Sonia Smits, very beautiful, excellent actress, played the daughter of Dr. Oblivion, Bianca Oblivion. And then Peter Dvorsky plays Harlan, the member of the Videodrome cabal who pretended to find the episodes and initially exposed James Woods' character to it. He actually died at 70 last year in March, and he was a fantastic actor. He was in the 83 version of Dead Zone. He's been in I can't even think of all the films he was in up into the early 2000s. He was in Twins. People might recognize him from that. But he's a great actor, and I miss seeing him around. Last points on this movie that I would like to give is I thought that the physical effects in this movie were phenomenal. As you said, Tad, the Fly remake is so gross. It's because it's well done, right? This movie had super creative yet low budget effects. There's the famous scene where James Woods' character is watching a videotape or a video conversation, as it turns out, with Debbie Harry's character, and it zooms in to her mouth and it's saying, "Come to the TV, kiss me, come to the TV." And the TV screen appears to bulge out and he comes in and it swallows his face. And there's a couple of scenes. There's a gun that comes out and it looks like static, and then the static goes away and it looks like flesh. And that's all done. It was just brilliant. They took basically a hollowed out or fabricated television box, and they put a flexible mesh on the front and projected the image on the back, and then could do whatever they wanted with it, or the front. They might have even projected in the front at some point, depending on what they were doing. But I think it looks fantastic.
It's really clever special effects that now would just be done by some nerd in a computer room.
Sure. It would just be one of us sitting in front of a computer doing something, and it wouldn't look half as good. It really wouldn't. And there's lots of prop work in this movie. There's lots of televisions that throb and cassette tapes that undulate and have veins. That when the shooting rampage is going on, James Woods' hand gets sort of enmeshed with the gun and bolts of metal. It's very Tetsuo Iron Man. For anyone interested in Japanese cinema, which one day maybe we'll do that, or the sequel on this podcast, let us know if you want us to, because those are great films as well. But really good special effects. The kind of stuff Cronenberg is probably most well known for are in this movie. And personally, I miss practical effects. I don't think I'm alone in saying that while they sometimes are actually more expensive and they're difficult and time consuming, having a physical latex prop is so much more engaging than having 100% 3D. And if you augment those physical props with 3D, it's fantastic. You can do amazing things. Watch Jurassic Park.
I think part of the problem with modern directors trying to do practical effects, I think Star Wars is a good example of this, is they have millions of dollars to throw at practical effects, whereas the best practical effects were someone handing a bunch of crap to a person going, I gave you $500 of shit, now make it look weird. And people did it.
Yeah.
You have to be the most creative with the least amount of resources, and they don't have that problem anymore. They have whatever they want, and it just doesn't feel the same.
And sometimes the realism and the effect comes from sort of the innate shittiness of something too, right?
Exactly.
Like in the cathode ray mission, when Woods first walks in, the main room, it's like a room and then an overlooking office with like a one or a two-way mirror, is like it's just an empty room that like folding tables have been set up and dividers made out of graffiti, cardboard, and crap from the alleyway, separating these televisions playing whatever they want. And it's really, it looks much more like some of the makeshift shelters that I've seen in life versus what I would see in, say, District 9, and no dig at District 9 for that, but it's just a very different vibe. It's a very like, yeah, people have money to do that, they don't necessarily have money to make these weird metal bulkheads and shit that don't exist in the real world that some machinist would have to make and would cost so much money. It doesn't make realistic sense, you know. And it sort of helps a film like this, which has such insane fantastical elements, be disturbing, because those insane elements are present in a world where we see very, very real things. So I think this is interesting, talking about this as I babble on about it. I love Videodrome. Sounds like Tad, sounds like you did, but Greg and Mandy, it wasn't your cup of tea. I think that those are sometimes the best discussions. So we're going to go right into this with Greg. Who would you recommend Videodrome to, and why?
I mean, I will agree with Tad. Like the special effects in this are amazing. If you're a fan of practical effects and you're just a fan of kind of cool shit in movies that just isn't done anymore, this is a good one. If you watched all of Cronenberg's other films or even remotely interested, at least give it a try. I'm definitely going to go kind of through his catalog and see what else sounds interesting after this. Because I'm like, well, I've seen The Fly. This had things that engaged me. But I want to see something with a little more flesh to it.
Tad, who would you recommend Videodrome to, and why?
This is even though I feel this is more of a sci-fi film, this is definitely a horror film, and I recommend it to people who kind of like that old 80s, you know, Dawn of the Dead-ish kind of horror. Even though there isn't that much in it, there is enough of the practical effects, especially with what's his name, that agent. I'm going to call him Agent Smith now because I have no idea what his name is, because he looked like, actually, Agent Nixon, because he looks like Richard Nixon.
Yeah,
but when he gets shot,
he plays Barry Convex is his name, right? Or I forget his first name, but Convex is his last name. He's the head of the Spectacular Optics.
It's like, if you love those old, almost Tom Savini-esque kind of special effects, so it's like the dude gets shot 3 times and then starts exploding out with like cancerous tumors, and it doesn't stop for like a straight minute. He's just like, and his head's like splitting open, and he's still like gurgling and all that, even though James Woods is literally just walking away and he's still gurgling. I'm like, that guy should be super dead. His head's split open. He can't gurgle anymore, but he still is.
And it's interesting, that particular scene, because, and the actor is Leslie Carlson. He died in 2014, but he was also very good. He was in a lot of stuff. He was the Christmas tree salesman in A Christmas Story. He also was in Dead Zone. He's been in a lot of movies. He was in The Fly too. Cronenberg liked working with him, but it sort of calls back to Professor Oblivion had said that Videodrome gives tumors and it causes death, but he doesn't believe it's a tumor. He actually believes it's a new organ and that it's causing a physical evolution in humans. And we sort of get that. We wonder, is it some sort of weird hallucination that's causing this body to bubble and degrade, or is he somehow been changed by the Videodrome himself? It's an interesting touch that isn't really explained, and it's vile. It's a really vile scene. Before we go on, I do want to give Leslie Carlson his due and play this great clip from him when he first meets James Woods. He sends a car for him and essentially says, we need to talk since you know about Videodrome. And here's this clip.
Max Renn. I'm Barry Convex. I think that machinery you're wearing is too much for the shape of your face. Overwhelms you. Try something more spidery, more delicate.
I just love the way that he's talking about glasses. Like, James Wood has walked into the glasses store after hours waiting for him, and he puts on a pair of really bizarre, super 80s glasses. And he goes, I think that machinery, and it's just that weird little touch, the language that he's using is just so in keeping with the strangeness of the film, because we don't think of glasses as machinery. But Mandy, as a mechanical engineer, maybe you'd have a take on this, but it does, if we talk about our entire ocular structure with glasses, probably is a piece of machinery. Just a strange thought, and it sort of ties in with how technology is so utterly ingrained in our lives and becoming a part of it. I thought that was an interesting mix. Back on track, Mandy, would you recommend this film, and to who and why?
Okay. I mean, there's an audience out there for every film, so I guess you'd recommend it to someone. I would say, like what the guy said. I know that I said that this is not for me, but many of the aspects that were discussed today, especially concerning the special effects and the open-endedness of the storyline, I think are really great things to explore. And if those are what you like in movies, like this is a great one to check out.
And just as a note, I keep saying 1986. TERRORVISION is from 1986. Videodrome's actually from 1983, which means it was in production a little before then, probably, and probably came out after. So it literally is predating the internet completely. It is either contemporary with the internet, yet it still was not public. So this is definitely, it shows how it probably was in our consciousness, our public consciousness, prior to the internet actually becoming a thing, which is makes it super fascinating. So that comes to me. Who would I recommend Videodrome to? I'd recommend it to people who like odd, as you said, Mandy, open-ended slow burn movies, and like cyberpunk, because even though it's on the early end, sort of a low age of cyberpunk, I do think it is cyberpunk. That melding of technology, especially if you're kind of an old technology fan. I know we've got a lot of VHS fans out there. It really is. If you haven't seen it, you owe it to yourself to do that. If nothing else, you definitely have to sort of give it a watch and see if it is your cup of tea or not. So that's it for Videodrome. We're going to move on to our next film, TERRORVISION from 1986. TERRORVISION from 1986 is directed, as I said, by Ted Nicolau. We've done his movies before. We did Bad Channels, which was by him. And this was before Bad Channels, but I definitely think that people who like Bad Channels will probably really like TERRORVISION. Tad, you saw Bad Channels. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. This movie was, for me, kind of like the movie of my childhood, and I don't mean that as in like it represents my childhood. This movie feels like my childhood. And it was in 86. This movie came out in 86, right?
Yep.
But I'm thinking of like the early 90s where I spent so much time just in, you know, basements watching old movies and all that, and everything was highly colored, everything was weird, everything was an animatronic weird puppet thingy. It's like it had the exact vibe that coalesced everything that I remember about the early 90s, and this movie even predates it.
Totally. So to get everybody on board, TERRORVISION is a movie set in sort of a weird 1980s, but it's also sort of like a cookie cutter 1950s, but like everything looks like it's supposed to be 1950s, 1960s, but it's really sordid and not kid friendly, even though everyone is sort of goofy. Like if you remember back to Edward Scissorhands, how all the houses look the same, everything's prefab, everyone's wearing pastels. It's like that, but with as Tad said, like an early 90s vibe. Like the mom's workout gear is geometric shapes. The house of the family where all this takes place is covered in like erotic paintings that are like Nagel's paintings, those famous 80s paintings that are in every hair salon and nail salon across the country. The plot, to get people on board, is that there is this seemingly typical family with a young son, probably 8, I think, somewhere around there, 9, I don't know, not a good judge, but somewhere in there, a teenage daughter, who's into the new wave punk scene, wears all bracelets and everything. A mom who is played by the genre legend Mary Woronov. She's been in so many things, Blood Theater, Chopping Mall was probably my favorite, even though she's only got a little part in that. And then the father is played by Garrett Graham, who is probably most well known for Child's Play 2. He plays the dad, but he's been in everything. He was Beef in the Phantom of Paradise, lots and lots of stuff. Now, one cool note, especially since the new Bill and Ted movie came on streaming fairly recently, is the daughter is played by Diane Franklin, that people might recognize as Princess Joanna from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure back in '89.
I was watching this with my wife, and I was like, guess who that is? And she had no clue. I'm like, that's the princess from Bill and Ted. She's like, what?
Yes, yes. And it also, the little boy is Sherman. And I always liked to remember him as the voice of Charlie Brown in Happy New Year, Charlie Brown from '86. So he literally was Charlie Brown the same year that he was in TERRORVISION. That makes me happy. John Grise also is in it as the punk boyfriend OD.
That's amazing.
And he was in Napoleon Dynamite as Uncle Rico. And so you have this family. The dad is installing a new satellite dish so they can get lots of channels. And at the same time as he gets it up, way across in another galaxy, some alien trash dump accidentally beams this giant television traveling man-eating monster ping-ponging across the galaxy into this guy's satellite dish. So what happens is he sort of possesses the TV systems in the satellite dish, and he shows up on the TVs and comes out, eats someone, and goes back in. At the same time as the TV keeps getting channels or getting a signal from that planet where the guy who was supposed to send this monster off into the nether regions of space is like, beware Earth people, take down your satellite dishes, blah, blah, blah. There's also a crazy grandpa who's played by Burt Remsen, who is yet another legendary character actor. He's been in lots of stuff. He was in Dick Tracy, Clueless. He's been in so many things. Great actor, super awesome. He plays this curmudgeonly yet grandson-loving survivalist who has like a bunker in the house filled with explosives and weapons and Confederate flags. And he has a vet. Yeah, right. So here's the thing. I love that on the door with all these pictures written in marker, there's it's like run somewhere else, but then the other one is, the other thing written in marker is steal from someone else. And like, and it's just, and he's got all these survival books and a Star Wars puzzle, I think. And one, that was a weird little thing tucked in there. Don't know the importance of that. Anyway, the family doesn't believe the kid when the grandpa gets eaten. And then of course, everyone one by one sees the monster, and the monster can eat people and then use their heads and their voice to kind of trick other people. I think the one thing missing out of the synopsis is that the monster is a physical, practical effect. It is giant. It is the size of like, I don't know, 3 Daleks from Doctor Who put together. Maybe, I don't know what else, like a golf cart. It's maybe the size of a golf cart. And it's totally just a mass of wet meat with a giant tentacle eye and big teeth. And it has this hand-like tongue, which is probably a hand, that comes out of its mouth, and it can suck things into it from a distance. So that's really the movie in a nutshell, is this family realizing that the monster is real and then trying to defeat the monster with no success. Am I getting that right? Does anybody have any other?
I have a theme for this movie, but I will wait. I will let everybody else talk first.
I was going to say, you forgot the most important part of the movie is that the parents are swingers.
Fuck,
yes,
God damn it.
I did.
Yeah.
So that's the level, right? Is that everything seems normal, and then the parents are like, okay, we're gonna go out and swing tonight, so you guys be in bed because we're gonna come home with.
Not even swing tonight. We're going to bring them back home, so go to bed.
And I want to know where this house is, because I don't think the house is a soundstage. It's weird because it looks like they maybe blacked off all around the house, because it's like floating in another region, like behind the hedges in the backyard, there's just sky. It's really strange. But it looks like an actual house with like a tub and stuff, or several houses. It's just the weirdest swinger pad. It's all in like really cheesy 80s Italian restaurant fashion, with like but like I said, there's erotic paintings on every wall, some of which are pretty awesome, and like this sort of Andy Warhol-esque vibe. And And of course the kids are just wandering around like nothing's happened. This is like their environment. And the parents, of course, are just super, they eventually do come back with a couple and are super trying to get in their pants. And there's this interesting homophobic exchange where they find out that the Greek man they brought back with his attractive wife is interested in the husband and not the wife. And his reason for that is because I'm Greek. I like Greek things. I like boys. And you know, I'm like, okay, an entire country was just attacked, and an entire sexual preference and orientation. It's not a choice, people. Has been offended by this. Like, it was just the most. And this character has my favorite line in the whole movie. It's the character's name is Spiro, and it's played by Alejandro Rey, who acted for many moons. He was in The Flying Nun all the way back into the 60s. And this clip is when the parents have shown the swinging couple the pool. And they've also seen Sherman, who's like, oh, there's a monster. And the mom is like, I'm going to smack the shit out you. You go hang out with Grandpa. And she throws him in the bomb shelter and locks it. Of course, there's potentially a monster in there. But they go back and they're showing the pool. And they're like, your kid was cute. Has you ever thought about acting? And this is to set this off. This is their conversation.
The only thing the kid is interested in is being a soldier. Oh, such a manly pursuit, raping and pillaging, creating life and taking it away, like the god of the ancient Greeks. Oh, hey, guy. I mean, I'm a lover, not a fighter.
So in case you couldn't understand that heavy accent, he's like, oh, the life of a soldier, raping and pillaging, creating life and taking life. I'm like, that is the weirdest segue to a swing party I could possibly imagine. There's so much bizarreness in this movie. And that line is my favorite, because it's just, you're like, yeah, I mean, I guess that's what's happening in this movie. And I think that it's sort of this kind of dialogue, as well as like the insane set and the nude pictures and like the crazy juxtaposition between like this sort of nuclear family and this unsavory, quote unquote, or just downright weird situation that they're put in. It makes the film seem completely unreal. Whereas Videodrome starts itself off like in like, this is the real world. Here's some sort of gritty reality. TERRORVISION from scene one is like, this is insane. It's going to be goofy. Don't get attached to anyone because none of this matters. Just enjoy the ride. I don't know if anybody else felt that way, but the movie does open with a like shot of a miniature, scale city on another planet, and it's like trash dump or like municipal waste plant or whatever, and this guy zapping this monster through space, and then the signal, the illustrated little animated signal, bounces between planets with like pinball sounds, and then before it gets to the satellite dish on Earth. So it's like they don't waste time telling you exactly what this movie is going to be like, and I appreciate that.
Did too.
Oh, Mandy, what were you going to say?
I was just saying that I appreciated it as well. And I did enjoy the ride. The whole thing was ridiculous and awesome. And I loved every minute of it.
I feel like comparing this with Videodrome is like Tommy Wiseau's The Room, where like he says like, oh yeah, I was really inspired by, it was either, I think it was Rebel Without a Cause.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, if Videodrome is Rebel Without a Cause, then TERRORVISION is 100% The Room, where it's just this like crazy fucking film. I loved it. I loved it a lot. I think the only downside for me was honestly, I didn't want the plot to happen. Like the monster,
right?
That was like the slow part. I was like, no, like I want to see more of this family, and like let's rewind. And I want to see a week. I just want to see a week of what this family is like.
I wanted
Yeah.
to see like the Addams Family series of this family.
Yeah, like it would be a fantastic series, you know, like the Puttermans is what I think their name is. Just the Puttermans. And it's just, you know, grandpa's escapades, like trying to sell, he sells lizard tail jerky because they grow them back. So it's the perfect survival food. So like they're constantly offering people lizard tail jerky. And there's also, we didn't mention Medusa, the character.
Oh my God.
Yeah, like how did you not mention her in the synopsis?
Yeah,
like,
she is an Elvira knockoff that keeps coming on the TV but she's an Elvira knockoff who between showing the show, like the movie that she's showing, invites people to call her like off the air for some unknown reason, and the kid like calls and she's like, I don't, you know, like are you in a psychiatric ward or whatever? But eventually the parents they don't know that they've been eaten, but the parents have been eaten, the grandpa's been eaten, the like satellite dish dealer's been eaten. They sort of tame this monster, right? Because spoiler alert, you find out that these were pets on another planet that eventually mutate and become monsters and have to be shot into space. And you get this moment where the monster seems to be learning, like, oh, this is food, this is music, this is TV, and then they call Medusa at that point. It's like, hey, we need him on TV, we're gonna make money with him. And she actually shows up drunk later because they tell her it's a party, right? And she has these ridiculous, I'm not saying this to body shame, she's a very pretty lady, but her breasts are ridiculous in the way they have them, right? They're pressed up so much that it's the shelf, you know, like she could rest her drink there. So it's so distracting. And of course that's the point. But it's the Elvira bit, but it's just strange.
And doesn't she live there? Like that's like the implication is she lives on the set. Because she closes herself in this coffin and then like, oh shit, that's right, the phone's ringing, better crawl out of my tomb.
And then she tells her assistant to grab her a beer. And it's just, and then she's gonna get to parties. And her call-in line is still open when the show's over. Like the weird, that's the most insane part about this movie, is that, maybe second, I'll get to the first, but the most insane part is that this TV hostess is taking calls but not on the air for no reason, and you can call her after the show's over at the same number and she answers the phone, like, and it's an 800 number. Like, you don't even, her character was totally out there. So here's something, the little boy, when his grandpa gets eaten, and the eating was awesome because it's not just like eating, it's sort of like a spider, right? Like it clamps onto him and then it sort of vibrates them and sucks them and goo comes out, and then they just like, they're gone in just a pile of this nasty goo. And I can't remember what that substance is called that they use in all these movies. Alien had it too. It's really viscous and really gross and sticky and hard to clean, but it's all over this movie.
Oh, it's real. It's just a real thing. They have an alien that kills people in movies.
Well, so the most unbelievable thing in this movie is that the kid calls the cops early on, and then he calls them again, and they're like, I'm gonna arrest you. And the cops show up to arrest a white kid. To me, I was like, this is not gonna happen. The cops are pointing a weapon at a child and he's white. This is the United States, people.
Well, he had an assault rifle in his hand and the cop didn't just shoot him immediately. So
I know. That's the thing. And the kid is wandering around with an assault rifle for the entire thing.
Oh, and a grenade.
And a grenade.
Sorry.
It's just it's insane. And the police officer is horrible. He shows up like, I mean, I don't know how many of these, like, all of a sudden, and they did it sort of right though, right? Like the police officer is this young guy. He shows up, essentially draws his gun and points it at everyone throughout the entire scene. Hears this explosion from the other room, but then turns to point the gun at the children.
Who's a worse cop, him or Barney Fife?
Well, this guy gets eaten pretty quickly. And as do many people that come in. I want to talk about, we're jumping all over the place, but I want to talk about the grossness of the pool. At one point, the people are killed in the pool, and there's just this, I don't know what effects, like what they put in the water. It looks like people just barfed in the water, like a lot of them. And it's just these floating miasma in the pool. And it's really gross. And at one point, one character, Spiro, he's like, let's do a quickie with his wife while they're waiting for the parents to come back with drinks. He like pulls, what's this? And he has this literally just a handful of stage goop. And he's like, maybe it's the sex lubricant. And he's just running. It's the most insane before he's eaten. And it's just the most, like, my wife said it, and it's the thing, you really don't know where this movie's going at any point in time. They literally keep throwing new things in. And as much as alien tormenting a family and coming through the TV is not necessarily something that's original, it's, I never know what's going to happen. You know, when Medusa actually shows up, you're like, okay, I didn't expect that to happen. And I was all right. I saw this movie on Sci-Fi Channel 2 decades ago, maybe. No, longer than that, 30 years ago, almost, when I was probably too young to really.
Man,
but it's like,
you were way young.
it's like a cartoon.
I'm gonna have to talk to your mother.
But it's like Sci-Fi Channel, so they took away everything interesting. But it's like a cartoon. Like, this film is like a slapstick cartoon with swingers and machine gun toting conservatives and really crappy satellite dish repair people.
You see what I was talking about how this was like my childhood? Dude, this is literally a live action Nicktoons before the Nicktoons even existed. Mm-hmm. It's like it could almost market itself as a kid's movie, except for all the violence and sex.
Right. It's an episode of Rocko's Modern Life. It's
yeah,
really what it is.
Exactly.
And I absolutely was entertained throughout the whole thing. My favorite part is the monster when he's going to eat something. He literally goes, nom, 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 nom. Oh, just constant. And he has this big flapping Pac-Man mouth with tons of teeth and slime. And I'm like, it's before nom, 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 but it's essentially just nom, 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 nom. And it's just that over and over again. He does it every time. Like, it's not just a one time. Like, clearly they were like, this is a choice. We're going to do this choice. And he's just going to nom, nom it the whole way.
You know my favorite part?
What's your favorite part?
My favorite part was when, like, the daughter comes home and, like, she goes into her parents' bedroom. Like she's, like, looking for them. And, like, everyone's been eaten by the monster. Like, the monster's in the bed and it, like, pukes up the heads.
Yeah, it's just the heads above the thing.
So, like, but it looks like her parents have the swing couple in bed with them. And she's like, Mom, you're so embarrassing. Like, you're so gross. And then she's like, we're looking for have you seen Grandpa? Like, where's Grandpa? He's missing. Like, you guys don't seem to care. And then, like, the monster, like, is like, oh, uh-oh. Like, he pukes up, like, the father's head.
The grandpa comes out and is like, I'm right here, honey.
I'm right here. And they're all slimy. Like, they're just really slimy. And, like the daughter's reaction is just like, oh, it's just so funny. Like,
they have some of that Greek sex lube on them.
Oh,
right, it's all over.
And it really is. And I give Ted Nicolaou credit for not including semen jokes, because literally everything is gooey in this movie. It's really gross. Like, everything is covered in this viscous translucent slime. Faces, hands, props, the floor, the carpet, you got to tear that out. Like, that is not going to survive. Done.
You may need to see a doctor if that's what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a citizen reviewer, Basil 1984 on IMDb gave a snippet of a review that I really liked. It's an off-the-wall comedy that feels like a 1950s monster movie starring Leave It to Beaver as filtered through Adult Swim. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty close. I guess I also really like, so this is a spoiler as well. I don't think it matters because I don't really think the plot actually has anything to do with this movie. The monster wins. And I really enjoyed that creative touch, right? Because he's basically part Medusa. He's got Medusa as well. And he's like, jumps in the car with her assistant and is like, take me to the TV station, which is essentially, right, like potentially the end of the human race. You know what I mean? Although you don't know, it's only one monster. But I enjoyed that because he was actually the purest character in the thing. Everyone else is pretty awful when you come right down to it. The parents are not nice to the children. The daughter doesn't even care. That their first thought, and the little boy, is holy shit, this monster's ours. We own him. We can make money. And that's like the point where you're like, all right, everyone can just can just get eaten, and that's fine. And they do. I'm like, it's so rare that a movie gives me exactly what I want, that I'm kind of flabbergasted when the end comes, and that's what it is. I think when comparing this movie to Bad Channels, Bad Channels is really like it's just like a flimsy framing story around music videos. And that's not what this is. This is solidly a movie that feels like a skit-based movie because little things happen throughout it. Like this scene, like, oh, we're teaching the monster what food is. Oh, we're doing this. Oh, we're doing this. And then now it's back to chasing us. So it's like these little skits that play out, but I found them satisfying. And I do think, as we kind of talked about, and as you, Greg, and Mandy mentioned with Videodrome, I think the pacing of this movie is right. I'm never left long to think about anything. There's always some new bizarreness. And when I think it's going to happen exactly the way it is, it doesn't always happen that way. Even though I'm like, this person's probably going to get killed. Well, they are, but it's going to be a little different than you think.
We grew up on liquid television. I think that synopsis you gave was incorrect. They said through the lens of Adult Swim, and I think that's way too contemporary.
You're right.
You got to put these movies in the context of the time they were made. This was
Aeon Flux shorts and exactly. The Head and
the weird shit. It's like, it doesn't matter if there's a plot or not. Let's just get weird, and it worked great. But that was the feeling I had the entire time. Again, why I was like, this is like my childhood, because this was kind of like an archetype. That thing you want a series about this family, it should have been a liquid television show.
Yeah,
when it was still around.
That's true. And I think we also should mention the theme song to this movie called TERRORVISION.
It was pretty banging.
It's awesome. It's by the Fibonacci's band. And I recommend listening to it. They actually did a lot of soundtrack stuff in the 80s and for some other movies that are worth checking out. But it's just a total new wave post-punk. It's not an epic, but it's a horror theme by way of the B-52s.
Actually, yeah, my wife said Rock Lobster. She's like, this sounds like Rock Lobster. I'm like, it's not, but I see why you get that.
Yeah, it's very much the party music vibe from that era. Okay, so we are coming to that point in time where we're gonna ask each and every one of us, who would we recommend this movie to and why? Tad, who would you recommend TERRORVISION to and why?
Everyone in the MTV generation. It is a travesty that I missed out on this movie when I was young, because this movie is entirely indicative of those of us that grew up on MTV. This is, the Susie's eye makeup is absolutely on point. I could not believe how amazing it was. Like there are people out there trying to emulate that stuff right now, and they don't even know where they're getting it from. Like, they already mastered this in the 80s.
Yes, totally agree.
Remember that theme that I was talking about? By the way, before we get any further, this movie to me was kind of an allegory on extreme sexual deviancy, which kind of ties into Videodrome. I don't know if you did it on purpose or not, but it kind of explored the same themes of pursuing.
Everything's on purpose.
I know, I'm sure it is. That pursuit of extreme stimulation. I totally thought that this movie was going to bait and switch me when the parents said, "Oh, we're going swinging," and then he said, "Oh yeah, swing dancing," and I was like, "Oh, I see what they did." And then they're actually swinging, and I'm like, "Oh my god, they're actually doing this." And throughout the entire movie, I realized these parents are basically abusing their children.
Yeah.
Not through what they're doing. I don't really judge them for what they're doing, but the fact is that they're being so open and exposing their children to it, and their children are absolutely repulsed by it. And it explains why, the younger one latches onto his grandpa, who's basically like, you know what, compared to this, I'd rather be in a bunker with some guns and grenades.
Yep.
But the daughter definitely rebels a little bit against it too. She's like, what the hell are you all doing? That's gross.
Yeah, the daughter who took her boyfriend home to mess around,
I
and
know.
her boyfriend just wants to do pills. But it's true though, right? Like you know, it's that whole like you want your parents to be a little different than you, or you want to be different than your
Yeah,
parents.
I don't want to bang three people at the same time. I just want to bang one dude and do some drugs, like a
Yeah.
proper Gen Xer.
It's that is very accurate. That is very accurate. And just as a note, because I didn't mention it earlier, the other swinger opposite of Alejandro Rey is her name is Randy Brooks, and she did a lot of these. She has a very high voice, sort of a Columbia kind of voice, and she's pretty well known in the 80s. She was also Fran in The Man with Two Brains. I think that's what most people might remember her from, with Steve Martin. Totally a great character actress. She sort of takes over the scenes because she has this like face breaking smile and this really high voice. Okay, Greg, who would you recommend this movie to and why?
When I was watching it, I actually was thinking a lot about Black Dynamite.
Yeah.
Obviously day and night plots, but that same kind of self-awareness. It knows how to pace itself. It just tries stuff. It throws jokes at you. Like Tad, like you said, with the swingers bit. And like Mandy, you brought up with the grandpa in bed with them. Like
That moment.
It just kind of, I think it accepts itself as it is, like in terms of writing, and I loved that. Also, yeah, I'm utterly appalled that we did not mention Jennifer Richards as Medusa sooner. That was absolutely wonderful.
She was fantastic, and she really, my wife said this, and it's totally true. It worked because no actor in this was not willing to ham it up to the same level. Like everyone is like, oh, that's this. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. It's totally the vibe. And of course, Jennifer Richards also has been in many things. Not probably as well known as some other actors of her era, but I think COD is probably one worth watching with Chris Lemmon. So give that a listen, give that a watch.
Like you said, I think the monster with the straight man of this movie, if there is one.
Yes, totally, absolutely. Mandy, who would you recommend this movie to and why?
All right, so I think like a lot of like trends in like fashion stuff like comes back around. I think like our generation growing up in the 80s and early 90s, like we have this appreciation for like the weirdness of all of it. And I think millennials are really coming back to that because they have like the most bizarre memes and like humor that like even I don't get, like, and it's just very out there and strange and like a dream world kind of like things are very like loosely put together or just totally bizarre. And like that's what makes them funny. And I honestly think like younger kids or like younger folks these days, they really, really like this. And it might be something that they're not necessarily going to find or be exposed to otherwise, but they could dig it. Like it's coming back full circle.
I think you're right, and it's worth noting that this movie is rated R, but really, I mean, that's it might be PG-13 at some point because there's the only real nudity is in the very very cartoonesque paintings in the house, and there are a couple of scenes on the TV of an orgy scene, which by the way, it's only a few seconds long, and also they did an amazing job of finding a scene that has no penises, nipples, or vaginas in it. Like I don't know how many bodies are in that shot, and you don't see anything. So that was really impressive. And I kept watching it thinking, you could show this to your 8-year-old. Like they may not, I don't know if they like it or not. But definitely your 12-year-old might enjoy it because it's goofy. It's monster gory, but there's no blood. It's always this ooze. And even the people in danger are comedic. People, especially when the parents die, the sort of camera back and forth between them screaming and backing up and the monster going, nom, nom, coming closer. Like just, it's slapstick. It's very slapstick. So yeah, I completely agree with that. For me, I would recommend TERRORVISION to, as Tad said, as Mandy said, great. Children of the 90s are really going to like this. And the fashions are pretty great. They're very bold. They're over the top. They're that escalation of fashion to costume without being cheap. And I think that's worth seeing, if nothing else. Plus, I am obsessed with the gaudiness of this swinger pad. It's just so over the top. Everything is like soft reds and marble. And at one point, they're supposed to have Sherman throws a grenade and it blows up part of the wall, and it's like solid concrete, like all the way through. I'm like, that is a weird ass house. So I don't know how that plays, but yeah, I would recommend it. This film was a lot of fun. If you want something that is not heavy on the thinking, but still can be talked about. So
also for you Marvel conspiracy theorists, this could be part of the MCU, because I'm pretty sure that the alien race that released this monster accidentally is a Skrull.
He does look kind of like a
Skrull. I can see that.
Exactly like a Skrull.
Yeah, he does. He's a little blue, but yeah, I think he could be Skrull. And you know what? It would fit right in with some bizarre ass Squirrel Girl story or something, where they're like continuity. Okay, so that is it for this episode of Cult and Classic. I want to again thank Greg Johnson, Tad Mastroianni, and Mandy Longley, and I am Nate Wyckoff here. To play us out, as always, is the Chud. Want to remind everyone that we have our Patreon up at patreon.com/Cult and Classic Podcast. That is patreon.com/Cult and Classic Podcast. You can donate to us. It really helps us out, lets us know that you like what we're doing. Also, we still take requests for movies and other things at cultandclassicpodcast@gmail.com. And we hope you guys have a great day and enjoyed the show. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to Cult and Classic Podcast. This podcast is important to me, but what's more important are the rights, privileges, and freedom from violence of everyone in this country and in this world. And that means supporting Black Lives Matter. If you'd like to make a donation, please go ahead and visit cultandclassicpodcast.com, where we have a list of places you can donate and help out. And please stay safe.